Everett Grant sat on the hood of his sleek black sedan, staring into the twilight as if the horizon might offer answers. The city lights blinked behind him, reminders of the empire he had built. Companies, towers, accounts filled with wealth. Yet for the first time in his 36 years, it all felt weightless. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The words clung to his mind like a brand he couldn't burn away. A slow, merciless thief had entered his body, and all the boardrooms, contracts, and accolades could not bargain it out. He whispered into the dusk, "What have I really done that mattered?" The question echoed louder than the hum of traffic on I-95. He pulled out his phone, with hands steadier than his heart. "Clear my schedule," he told Marcus, his executive assistant. The rest of the week. No meetings, no calls. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of Marcus swallowing confusion. "Understood, sir." Everett ended the call before questions could follow. He tossed the phone into the passenger seat, climbed behind the wheel, and merged onto the interstate. The road stretched south, familiar and strange all at once. His leather seat cradled a man who had once believed speed and strategy could conquer anything. Tonight, his destination was not a merger or a gala. It was the small town where he had grown up, where the roots of his story still clung stubbornly to the soil. And there, in a modest two-story house with peeling paint and a basketball hoop leaning tiredly in the driveway, lived his childhood companion, Nathaniel King, the boy who once shared peanut butter sandwiches with him, who believed Everett's dreams before Everett had the courage to voice them. It was time to go home. The familiar neighborhood rose around Everett like a memory made real. Cracked sidewalks, oak trees bending over narrow streets, children's bicycles abandoned in front yards. His chest tightened as he turned onto Maple Drive, a place he hadn't seen in years yet, still knew by heart. Nathaniel King's house stood at the end of the block, worn but proud. The same chipped shutters, the same slanted porch where they used to plan impossible futures. Everett parked at the curb and sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, afraid of what he might feel walking up those steps. The door opened before he could knock. Nathaniel Carter, carrying the same easy steadiness, stepped onto the porch. His eyes widened, surprise flickering before recognition softened his face. "Everett Grant," Nathaniel said slowly, as if testing the weight of the name. "I'll be damned." Everett forced a smile, though his throat was thick. "It's been too long, Nate." Nathaniel clasped his shoulder, guiding him inside without another word. The living room smelled of coffee and old books, a sanctuary worlds away from Everett's glass towers. For the first time in months, Everett felt something shift inside him, like maybe he wasn't facing the storm alone. They sat at Nathaniel's old oak table, the same one Everett remembered from countless childhood dinners. A chipped edge still bore the scar from when they tried to carve their initials into it, only to be caught by Nathaniel's mother before they could finish. Everett ran his fingers across the groove and chuckled softly. "We thought we were leaving a legacy," Nathaniel laughed, a deep sound that carried the comfort of years. "And my mama nearly left a legacy on our hides." The two men eased into the rhythm of old stories. The summer, they tried to build a raft and nearly drowned. The high school game where Everett missed the winning shot, but Nathaniel claimed the loss as his own. The late nights when they dreamed of the future. Everett spoke less than he listened, letting the cadence of their past settle his restless heart. After a pause, Nathaniel leaned back, his smile tugging wider. "Speaking of futures, I've got news." His eyes shone with a quiet excitement Everett hadn't seen before. "Cynthia and we just found out yesterday. She's pregnant." Everett blinked, the words sinking in like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Nate, you're going to be a father?" "Yeah," Nathaniel said, almost whispering it as if savoring the truth. "We've been hoping for years, and now it's real." Everett felt a lump form in his throat. The timing struck him with force. The contrast of Nathaniel stepping into new life while he was being handed a slow countdown. Yet instead of envy, he felt gratitude for this spark of joy. He lifted his glass of water, voice steadier than his heart. To new beginnings, my friend. Nathaniel clinked his glass against Everett's, eyes warm. To new beginnings. Everett kept his decision close, the words of his diagnosis lodged deep in his chest. Tonight wasn't the time to unburden. It was a night for Nathaniel's joy, not Everett's shadow. He folded the thought away as the doorbell rang. Nathaniel rose, and in came Leah King, Nathaniel's younger sister, though now she looked every bit the accomplished woman she had become. She carried a gift bag, wrapped in silver tissue, her smile wide as she hugged her brother. "Congratulations, big brother," she said warmly, pulling out a polished wooden frame. Inside was a placeholder card that read, "Your first photo." For the ultrasound picture, she added, eyes shining, Reba, glowing already despite the early days, pressed a hand to her heart. "Leah, that's beautiful. Thank you." Then Leah turned, her eyes landing on Everett. For a moment the years melted away. She stepped forward, embracing him without hesitation. "Everett Grant, look at you. It's been far too long." Everett chuckled, holding her at arm's length for a moment. "And look at you. I should be calling you Dr. Leah King now," she smiled, tilting her chin with mock pride. "Yes, I earned that title. Don't you forget it." Laughter filled the room, weaving comfort around them. For Everett, it felt like slipping into an old jacket, worn, familiar, but still strong at the seams. Nathaniel clapped his hands together. "Enough standing around. Let's go celebrate properly. Dinner's on me." They piled into 2 cars and drove into town, ending up at a cozy restaurant Nathaniel loved. The place smelled of roasted herbs and garlic, tables draped in linen, candles flickering gently. They ordered a spread, steaks for the men, salmon for Reba, a glass of wine for Leah. Over dinner, conversation danced between light banter and heartfelt dreams. Nathaniel teased Leah about her long study nights. Leah teased Everett about once promising to teach her how to drive, but chickening out. And Reba kept her hand resting over her stomach, as if already protecting what was to come. Everett listened more than he spoke, smiling at the comfort of their voices. For the first time since hearing the doctor's verdict, he felt something steady inside him. Life was still moving forward around him, vibrant and unstoppable, and maybe, just maybe, there was still time for him to be part of it. The days that followed were surprisingly calm. Everett lingered in Nathaniel's world, helping fix a squeaky screen door, walking with Reba down to the corner store, and sitting late at night swapping stories with his old friend. It was as if life had slowed into a rhythm he hadn't felt in decades, and for a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to believe he could stay there forever. But on the 3rd morning, his phone vibrated insistently. Marcus's voice came sharp over the line. "Mr. Grant, I'm sorry, but I couldn't hold it back any longer. There's a takeover attempt brewing. A rival board faction is gathering votes. If you don't return immediately..." The rest blurred. Everett stormed into the kitchen, where Nathaniel and Reba were preparing breakfast. His face was flushed, his hands trembling. "I need to leave," he barked. "My company, it's in trouble. I can't just sit here while..." Then, without warning, the world tilted. His vision spun, the floor rushing upward. Voices shouted his name, but darkness swallowed everything. When Everett opened his eyes again, the sterile brightness of a hospital room pressed against him. Machines beeped steadily. Nathaniel sat in the corner, jaw tight. Reba stood near the bed, worry etched into her features. Leah, now in her white coat, adjusted the IV drip with practiced calm. "You scared us," Nathaniel muttered, relief and frustration warring in his tone. Leah leaned closer, her voice soft but firm. "Everett, you have to get some rest. Your body is shutting down on you." His throat tightened, and he forced the words out. "No, it's not exhaustion. It's ALS, lateral sclerosis. My physician told me..." Leah's brow furrowed instantly. "Who told you that?" "My physician," Everett repeated almost defensively. Leah's frown deepened as she glanced at the monitor. "Everett, we ran full scans of your body when you were admitted. Nothing showed signs of ALS. Nothing. Let us do more testing." Hope and dread tangled in his chest. "You're saying it's not there?" "We'll confirm," Leah said gently. "But someone may have misdiagnosed you, or worse, lied to you. The question is, why?" The words struck him harder than any diagnosis. Lied by a physician he trusted? For what purpose? Hours dragged as further tests were run. Nathaniel and Cynthia never left his side, their presence steadying him more than they knew. When Leah finally returned, her expression carried both relief and confusion. "Everett," she said, setting her chart down, "your scans are clean. No trace of ALS. You're exhausted, malnourished, and under immense stress. But this disease, it isn't in you." His body trembled with the release of tension. He covered his face with his hands, overcome. For months, he had lived under the weight of an ending that wasn't even real. "You need rest," Leah said softly. "Sleep, eat, let your body heal. And maybe ask yourself, why would someone want you to believe you were dying?" The question lingered heavier than the illness ever had. The steady hum of the hospital machines had become background noise, but Everett's mind refused to rest. The words, "someone is lying to you," gnawed at him, echoing Leah's clinical certainty. He replayed every detail of the past months, appointments, conversations, odd pauses in his physician's office. And then, like a puzzle snapping into place, he remembered Cole Weston. Cole had been circling for years, a vulture with a polished smile. The Westons held a substantial share of Grant Global, but it wasn't enough to control it. Cole's latest maneuver had been both subtle and crude, pressing Everett to consider marriage to his granddaughter, a convenient union that would blend wealth and secure majority influence. Everett had laughed it off at first, but the persistence had been unsettling, and now an ALS diagnosis out of nowhere whispered boardroom coups, the push for him to step aside. It was too clean, too orchestrated. Nathaniel entered the room with 2 cups of coffee, his steady presence grounding Everett's storm. Everett gestured for him to close the door. "There's something you need to hear," Everett said, his voice low. "The so-called diagnosis, it wasn't a mistake. It was a setup," Nathaniel frowned, setting the cups down. "A setup by who?" "Cole Weston," Everett said, bitterness creeping in. "He thinks I'm too distracted by my own mortality to care about the company. He's been pushing me to marry his granddaughter. When I refused, he needed another way to get what he wanted. Convince me I'm dying, weaken me, then swoop in for the takeover." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He shook his head, fury flashing in his eyes. "That's sick. To play with someone's life like that." Everett leaned back, fatigue pulling at his shoulders. "It worked, Nate. I believed it. I was already preparing to step away. If Leah hadn't stopped me, if I hadn't come here, I'd be handing my legacy over to vultures." Nathaniel folded his arms. "So what now?" "You can't exactly walk into a board meeting from a hospital bed." A faint smile tugged at Everett's lips. "I don't need to. I've already put things in place. Trusted people are moving on my behalf. The more Cole thinks I'm out of the picture, the more reckless he'll get. And when he overplays his hand, we'll be ready." Nathaniel studied him carefully. "You're sure about staying here? About letting them think you're still sick?" "Yes," Everett said firmly. "South Carolina is far enough from the boardroom noise. Let them believe I'm broken. It's the perfect cover. While they circle like sharks, I'll be here healing and planning." Silence hung for a moment, heavy but steady. Then Nathaniel nodded slowly. "All right. You fight your battles your way. Just know you're not fighting alone." For the first time since the storm began, Everett felt the faintest flicker of control returning. The Westons thought they had him cornered, but they had underestimated one thing. He wasn't finished yet. The days in the hospital passed slower than Everett liked, but he forced himself to remain patient. Leah had quietly agreed to help him dig deeper into his so-called diagnosis, while Nathaniel and Reba kept him grounded with home-cooked meals and quiet company. Leah combed through medical records and reached out to colleagues. One evening, she walked into his room with a thin folder in her hands, her expression sharp. "Everett, I traced the scans your doctor claimed he ran. They don't exist. No lab, no imaging center has records of them. What he gave you was fabricated." Everett's jaw tightened. "So it's confirmed. Someone bought my physician, or threatened him," Leah added. "Either way, it wasn't medicine. It was manipulation. And the trail leads back to someone with influence, someone with money. Cole Weston." Everett muttered, the name bitter on his tongue. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom in New York, tension crackled. Cole Weston sat at the head of the table, exuding confidence. His granddaughter, perfectly styled, lingered quietly beside him, a silent symbol of the alliance he'd tried to force. "Gentlemen," Cole began smoothly, "Mr. Grant has been unwell for months. His absence has left this company vulnerable. For the sake of stability, we must act." Murmurs rippled through the board. Some nodded in agreement, others exchanged wary glances. Cole leaned forward. "I propose an interim leadership change. Someone who can step in now, someone who understands legacy and loyalty." He didn't need to name himself. Everyone in the room understood. But across the polished table, one of Everett's most trusted allies, Caroline Hayes, raised her hand. "With respect, Mr. Weston, Everett Grant is still alive and still chairman. Until he formally steps aside, this board has no authority to displace him. If we act prematurely, shareholders will see it for what it is, a hostile grab." Cole's smile thinned, but his voice remained honeyed. "Caroline, you've always been loyal. But loyalty won't save us when investors start asking where our leader has gone." Back in South Carolina, Everett listened intently as Leah laid out her findings. Nathaniel, leaning against the window, shook his head. "So Cole Weston wanted you out, and when you refused to marry into his family, he found another way. Hell of a plan if it hadn't been for Leah." Everett rubbed his temples. "I underestimated how far he'd go. That won't happen again. If Cole thinks my silence means surrender, he's in for a surprise." Leah placed a hand on his arm, steady and firm. "Then let me help. We'll gather proof, enough to show not just the board but the authorities if need be. Medical fraud is no small crime." Everett exhaled slowly, his determination hardening. "Good. While my people counter his moves at the table, we'll uncover the truth here. Let Cole Weston think he's winning. Every step he takes only sets up his fall." The battle had begun, half in quiet hospital corridors, half in towering boardrooms. And Everett Grant, once resigned to death, was now more alive than ever, sharpening his resolve against betrayal. Leah returned to Everett's hospital room late in the evening, her face pale but resolute. She dropped a folder onto his bed. "I found out who funded your false diagnosis." Everett's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the documents. Shell payments, offshore transfers, all routed through third-party clinics. The trail led straight back to a Western-controlled subsidiary, his lips pressed into a hard line. "Cole didn't just want me gone. He wanted me discredited, weakened, and he's been moving money around for months." Nathaniel leaned forward. "You already suspected him of shady deals, didn't you?" Everett nodded grimly. "I started looking into Cole 6 months ago. Offshore accounts, shell companies. Nothing solid, but the smoke was there. Now I need the fire, the evidence, fast." 2 hours later, the call came. A number only Everett recognized flashed across his phone. "This is CipherWatch," the voice said. It was the cybersecurity firm Everett had secretly embedded into Grant Global's infrastructure. "We've traced unauthorized transactions. Weston's been siphoning funds for years. Hidden accounts in the Caymans, Luxembourg, even backdoor transfers disguised as vendor contracts. We're compiling proof now." Everett's chest tightened, not with fear but with sharpened clarity. "Send it all to my private line. Lock it down." As soon as he hung up, he drafted an email, short, precise, but thunderous in weight. "To all employees and executives of Grant Global, effective immediately, every department, executive office, and employee account will undergo a comprehensive audit. This is non-negotiable. A hostile attempt against this company has been uncovered. Information has been leaked from within, and I will find the source. Until further notice, all financial activities will be frozen pending review." Everett Grant, chairman, he hit send. The ripple was instant. Executives in New York gasped as the email pinged across their screens during a heated session. Cole Weston's confident smile faltered as whispers spread down the long boardroom table. The word audit chilled even the boldest allies. Back in South Carolina, Everett closed his laptop, exhaustion settling into his bones, but determination burning hotter than ever. "They think I'm too weak to fight," he murmured to Nathaniel and Leah, "but they've forgotten. I built this company from the ground up, and I will not let parasites devour it." The boardroom in New York was tense, the air thick with unease. Cole Weston had just finished laying out his proposal for interim leadership when the ping of incoming emails swept through the executives, tablets and laptops, as screens lit up with Everett's unmistakable signature. Silence fell. Each person read the words once, then again. Company-wide audit. Every employee, every executive. Frozen accounts. Caroline Hayes, Everett's most trusted ally, leaned back in her chair with the faintest smile. She raised her gaze to Cole. "Looks like Mr. Grant hasn't surrendered after all." Cole's jaw tightened, though he forced a calm expression. "This is a stunt," he said smoothly. "A desperate attempt to scare the board into compliance. The man is unwell. Surely you can all see that, but doubt was already spreading." Executives exchanged worried glances, some closing their laptops protectively, as though the email itself had exposed them. The Weston name was whispered with suspicion now, not admiration. Cole's granddaughter shifted uncomfortably at his side. For the first time, she looked less like a poised heiress and more like a pawn trapped in a game too large. Meanwhile, back in South Carolina, Everett sat propped up in his hospital bed. Leah at his side with her laptop open. Her fingers flew across the keys as she navigated layers of encrypted files sent from CipherWatch. "Here," she said, pointing to a trail of transactions. Offshore accounts disguised as consulting fees. Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, even Dubai. Whoever set this up had help. Bankers, lawyers, maybe even someone inside compliance. Everett rubbed his temple, anger simmering beneath his calm. He's been bleeding the company dry while selling himself as its savior. And the board almost bought it. Leah's voice dropped, her eyes meeting his. "Everett, this isn't just embezzlement. Some of these shell accounts connect to companies flagged in international probes. If Cole's tied to them, we're looking at organized crime-level fraud." Nathaniel, who had been quietly pacing the room, stopped cold. "That's not just a boardroom fight anymore. That's federal prison." Everett nodded slowly. "Which is why I need airtight evidence before I move. If I accuse him without proof, I look paranoid. But if I expose him with documents, audits, and digital trails, I bury him." Leah tapped a few more keys, her face lit by the screen's glow. "Then let's bury him. I'll start drafting a report that links these offshore funds to Weston subsidiaries. Once it's airtight, you can drop it like a hammer." Everett leaned back against his pillows, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The thought of Cole Weston cornered, scrambling, stripped of his false confidence. It was the fuel he needed. "They thought I was too weak to fight," he murmured. His eyes hardened, steel beneath the fatigue. But weakness was the mask. Now it's time to show them the man who built Grant Global doesn't bow. He strikes. The glow of Leah's laptop dimmed as she closed it, the room falling into a hush, broken only by the steady rhythm of Everett's heart monitor. Nathaniel had stepped out to call Reba, leaving them alone for the first time since the whirlwind began. Everett studied Leah for a moment, his voice softer than it had been in days. "Leah, why are you doing this? You're going above and beyond, digging into things that could put you at risk. Why?" Leah hesitated, her eyes flickering toward the window, where the moonlight spilled across the floor. She drew in a slow breath, her hands folding neatly in her lap before she spoke. "Because I care, Everett. More than I probably should." He frowned gently. "Care?" She met his gaze then, her expression raw in a way he had never seen. "I've always liked you. Even when I was younger, watching you and Nathaniel chase dreams bigger than this town. I knew you'd leave, and I never expected anything to come of it. But seeing you now, seeing you hurt, manipulated, it's too painful. I can't just stand back and let you face it alone." Everett was quiet, the weight of her confession pressing against him harder than the diagnosis had. He had spent his life pushing people away, guarding his empire, never allowing someone this close. Finally, he exhaled. a faint tremor in his voice. "Leah, I don't know what to say." She smiled softly, almost sadly. "You don't have to say anything. Just let me help. That's all I want." For the first time in years, Everett felt something stir inside him that wasn't fear or anger, something gentler. Hope. The first week of the audit shook Grant Global like a storm tearing through glass towers. Departments were frozen, accounts dissected, and executives who once strutted with confidence now whispered in hushed corners. The email from Everett had been short, but its echo was devastating. No one was untouchable. Caroline Hayes, sharp-eyed and loyal, oversaw the forensic accountants moving floor to floor. Each day, another ally of Cole Weston stumbled under the weight of unexplained expenses and questionable contracts. Men and women who once nodded eagerly at his proposals now avoided his gaze, terrified of being next in the spotlight. "Where's Weston's vote count now?" one executive muttered as files were seized. "He can't protect us. Not from this." Meanwhile, in a small office stripped of its usual authority, Dr. Ryan Lewis sat trembling. The company's compliance division had suspended him pending review of Everett's diagnosis. His license, his career, everything balanced on a blade. And the weight pressing hardest wasn't the suspension. It was Cole Weston. Cole's voice hissed over the phone, every word laced with venom. "You say one thing, Ryan, one thing, and I'll make sure you lose more than your license. You'll wish you'd never practiced medicine. Do you understand me?" Ryan clutched the receiver, sweat beading on his forehead. I had no choice. "You forced my hand. Don't play victim," Cole snapped. "You enjoyed the money." The line went dead, leaving Ryan in suffocating silence. For the first time, he realized Cole Weston wasn't just a manipulator, he was desperate. And desperate men made mistakes. Back in South Carolina, Everett read the first audit reports with a grim satisfaction. His physician's name had surfaced, his false diagnosis under suspension. Proof was building piece by piece. He closed the file and muttered, "The walls are closing in, Cole, and this time you can't buy your way out." Nathaniel, standing by the window, crossed his arms. "Then all that's left is the final blow." Everett's eyes hardened. "And I'll deliver it." The emergency board meeting was supposed to be Cole Weston's triumph. He had called it hastily, summoning executives and shareholders into the grand conference room with the promise of unveiling evidence of Everett Grant's decline and mismanagement. The room buzzed with anticipation, papers shuffled, murmurs spread. Cole stood at the head of the table, smug and commanding, his granddaughter seated just behind him like a prop for legitimacy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cole began smoothly, "Grant Global is in jeopardy. Our chairman has abandoned his responsibilities, leaving this company rudderless. I have documents here that will show his inability to manage the business, and I propose immediate action." He placed a thick folder onto the polished oak table, sliding it forward dramatically. The allies he had left nodded nervously, eager for someone to restore stability. But before Cole could continue, the double doors swung open. A hush fell. Everett Grant walked in. No announcement, no preamble. He carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who built the empire brick by brick. Though thinner from his hospital stay, his eyes burned with a clarity no one could mistake. Caroline Hayes quickly rose to her feet, relief flashing across her face. "Mr. Grant," she said firmly, "we weren't expecting you." "That's the point," Everett replied, his voice steady. He stepped to the head of the table opposite Cole, who froze mid-sentence. Cole recovered quickly, plastering on a smile. "Everett, what a surprise. We were just discussing your unfortunate absence." Everett placed a slim black folder onto the table, his hands deliberate. "Yes, I heard. Fortunately, while I was away, my IT team was working diligently. They've completed their investigation." Whispers rippled across the room. Everett didn't wait for silence. He opened the folder and slid copies of documents toward the board members. "These," Everett said, his tone calm but lethal, "are records of unauthorized wire transfers, hidden accounts, and falsified invoices. all traced directly to subsidiaries controlled by Mr. Weston. The FBI has already been contacted. They will be arriving shortly to collect the originals. Gasps broke out. Executives leaned forward, scanning the evidence with wide eyes. The numbers didn't lie. Cole's face paled, but he forced a laugh. Fabrications. This is nothing but a distraction. Enough! Caroline Hayes cut him off, her voice ringing through the chamber. I've verified these myself with the auditors. It's airtight, Weston. You've been stealing from this company for years. Cole slammed his fist on the table, but the sound only underlined his unraveling composure. You think you can ruin me with papers? Everett's gaze never wavered. No, Cole, you ruined yourself. I'm just pulling off the mask. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the sound of the door opening once more. Two men in dark suits stepped inside, flashing their badges. Cole Weston, the lead agent, said evenly, "We need you to come with us." The board erupted in chaos, half in shock, half in vindication. Cole's granddaughter buried her face in her hands as agents stepped forward. Everett remained standing, calm amidst the storm. He looked at the men and women who had doubted him, who had nearly handed over his life's work to a fraud. Grant Global will not be destroyed from within, Everett declared. Not while I still have breath. And for the first time in weeks, the boardroom echoed with applause, not for Cole Weston, but for the man who had built it all. The boardroom battle was over. Cole Weston was gone, his empire of lies collapsing in on itself. For the first time in months, Everett walked through his company's halls without the weight of betrayal pressing on his shoulders. Yet even in victory, his thoughts drifted elsewhere, toward the quiet strength of Leah King. They sat together one evening in Nathaniel's backyard, the summer air warm and filled with the hum of cicadas. Lanterns hung from the trees, their glow soft against Leah's profile as she leaned back in her chair. Everett cleared his throat, nerves tugging at him in a way no boardroom had ever managed. "Leah," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I need to tell you something. I've never been in a serious relationship." She turned to him, brows raised slightly, waiting. "I've had women in my life," Everett continued, "but they never saw me. Not really. They saw the money, the power, the name, not the man beneath it. And after a while, I stopped trying. I stopped trusting. But you," he paused, searching for words, "you're not them. And I would like to see where this could go." Leah's expression softened, a slow smile curving her lips. He looked down at his hands, clasped tightly in his lap. "You need to know I'm not sure how to do this. Dating, being in love. I've built companies, made deals across the globe, but this is unfamiliar territory." Leah reached over, gently covering his hand with hers. "That's okay, Everett. I understand. With my studies and all the years working toward my degree, I didn't have much time for dating either. I've missed things too." She squeezed his hand lightly. "So we'll learn this together." Everett let out a slow breath, tension he hadn't realized he was holding slipping away. For the first time in years, the future felt like more than quarterly reports or shareholder meetings. It felt personal. As the cicadas hummed and Nathaniel's laughter drifted faintly from inside, Everett turned his hand to lace his fingers with Leah's. A different kind of risk. Yes, but one he was finally ready to take. A week after Cole Weston's arrest, the storm at Grant Global had finally calmed. The audits were underway, trust was being rebuilt, and Everett felt steadier than he had in years. For the first time in decades, he wasn't racing toward profit or staring down betrayal. He was simply living, which was why, on a quiet Friday night, he stood outside Leah's small brick house, palms damp, despite the confidence he was known for. He held no grand bouquet, no lavish display, just himself. When Leah opened the door, her curls loose and her smile soft, Everett almost forgot the words he'd rehearsed. "You look beautiful," he said finally, his voice quieter than he intended. "And you look nervous," she teased, slipping into a light jacket. "Ready for this first date of ours?" He exhaled a laugh. "As ready as I'll ever be." They chose a quiet restaurant tucked off a side street. No paparazzi, no board members, no expectations. Just two people sitting across from each other, sharing pasta, laughter, and the simple joy of being seen. Everett stumbled over some of the smaller gestures, whether to reach for her hand across the table, how to compliment her without sounding rehearsed. But Leah's calm presence made it easy. Halfway through dinner, she set down her fork and said, "You don't have to be perfect, Everett. Just be honest. That's all I need," and he was. For 2 hours, he spoke about his fears, his mistakes, his disbelief at still having time ahead of him. Leah listened, not with judgment but with understanding. By the end of the night, Everett realized something startling. For once, he wasn't performing. He was simply himself. The next morning, Everett sat at a desk, a notepad before him. He had always measured his life in balance sheets and profits, but now he scribbled something different across the page. The Grant Foundation. Nathaniel leaned over his shoulder, brow furrowing. "What's this?" "A new direction," Everett replied. "Scholarships, community centers, medical grants. If I almost lost everything to greed and lies, then I'll spend what's left of my life giving something back. No more waiting." Leah, who had just arrived with fresh coffee, caught the look in his eyes. It wasn't the sharp glint of a businessman on the hunt. It was softer, steadier. "I like this version of you," she said, handing him a cup. "Not Everett Grant, the empire builder. Just Everett, the man who wants to do good." For the first time, Everett smiled without reservation. He had a company secure in loyal hands, a woman beside him who saw past the armor, and a new purpose bigger than any bottom line. Months had passed since the storm that nearly consumed Everett's life. In that time, the audits cleared the company of Weston's poison. The Grant Foundation began taking shape, and most unexpectedly, Leah had become more than the doctor who saved him. She had become his confidant, his partner, his anchor. 2 months into their relationship, Everett finally gathered the courage to voice what had been building inside him. They were walking along the riverfront in Charleston, the spring air cool, lanterns casting a soft glow on the water. He stopped, tugging gently on her hand. "Leah, I've spent most of my life guarding myself, building walls so no one could get too close. I thought it was safer that way. But then you—" He shook his head with a rueful smile. "You tore them down without even trying. And now I can't pretend anymore. I'm falling in love with you." Leah's eyes softened, her smile radiant in the glow of the lantern light. "I was wondering when you'd finally say it." "Because I've been falling too." Everett pulled her close, their foreheads touching, and for the first time, he felt what he had never thought possible, peace in love. Months later, Nathaniel and Reba invited them over to meet their newborn son, Jamel. The small home was filled with laughter, the scent of home-cooked food, and the soft coos of the baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Nathaniel handed Jamel carefully into Everett's arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled instinctively around Everett's thumb. His chest tightened, not with fear but with awe. Looking at Jamel, Everett felt the weight of all the second chances he'd been given, surviving betrayal, reclaiming his company, discovering love when he thought it was long past him. Nathaniel clapped him on the shoulder. "See, you don't just build companies, old friend. You can hold on to the important things too." Everett smiled faintly, gazing down at the child. "Maybe for the first time, I understand what matters most." That evening, as Leah and Everett walked back to the car, the moment felt too full to waste. He stopped again, his heart pounding harder than any boardroom negotiation ever had. "Leah," he said, his voice trembling slightly. She turned, curiosity in her eyes. Everett reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring, elegant, simple, timeless. "I never thought I'd get here. But standing with you, meeting Jamel, watching Nathaniel with his family, I know now I don't want to face the future alone. You're the reason I believe in it at all." His voice thickened with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Leah's breath caught, her eyes glistening. A slow, radiant smile spread across her face. "Yes, Everett, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and as she wrapped her arms around him, Everett knew this was the greatest victory of his life. Not one won in boardrooms, but in love. 2 weeks after Everett slipped the ring onto Leah's finger, the couple stood before a small gathering of family and closest friends in the chapel of Nathaniel's hometown church. There was no fanfare, no corporate headlines, just vows whispered with trembling voices and eyes brimming with love. Nathaniel stood proudly as Everett's best man, Reba holding baby Jamel, in the front pew, while Leah's colleagues from the hospital cheered softly from the back. Everett's hands shook as he slid the ring onto Leah's finger, but his voice was steady. For all the days I thought love wasn't meant for me, God must have been waiting for this moment. With you, Leah, I finally know what it means to live. Leah's smile glowed brighter than any diamond. And with you, Everett, I know what it means to be seen, not as a title or a degree, but as myself. I vow to walk this road with you hand in hand for all our days. When they kissed, the applause was heartfelt, not thunderous, a perfect echo for a wedding born not of spectacle, but of truth. 1 week later, after a quiet honeymoon on the South Carolina coast, where the only agenda was walking barefoot in the sand and learning each other's silences, Everett and Leah returned with renewed energy. Their first act as husband and wife was not a vacation memory, but a vision for the future. The official launch of the Grant Foundation. The event was modest but meaningful, held in a refurbished community center in Charleston. Children ran through the halls, volunteers bustled, and local leaders gathered to witness something more than charity. It was a promise of change. Everett, in a tailored suit, stood with Leah at the podium. He spoke not as a titan of industry, but as a man humbled by survival. For too long, he said, his voice resonant, I measured success by profit and power. But life reminded me, sometimes painfully, that the real measure of success is what we give back. The Grant Foundation will fund scholarships, support hospitals, and build safe spaces for families. And I'm proud to say this isn't just my vision. It's our vision. He reached for Leah's hand, drawing her forward. Leah addressed the crowd with quiet conviction. We've both spent years chasing titles and responsibilities, but now we want to build something lasting, together. This foundation is about hope, healing, and second chances. The applause was warm, and as Everett looked out at the faces, Nathaniel holding baby Jamel, Caroline Hayes standing tall in support, Leah glowing beside him, he felt something shift deep inside. This wasn't the beginning of another empire. This was the beginning of a legacy rooted not in wealth, but in love. The end. Thank you for listening to Green Tea Tales. Help support our channel with like, share, comment, follow us, and don't forget to subscribe.